Welcome to Cat's Magic, where I, Cat, talk about stuff related to magic. So last week, Wizards released the M14 core set rule changes, which basically encompass 4 main changes. The first one being the Legends and Planeswalker Uniqueness Rule. Second, the amount of cards you can have in your sideboard. Third, indestructible is now a keyword and unblockable is definitely not. And fourth, land plays. Let's start off with the Uniqueness Rule changes. The Planeswalker rule and the Legend rule are the ones that are being affected by this change. The Planeswalker Uniqueness rule, which is Rule 704 subsection 5J, states that if 2 or more Planeswalkers share a Planeswalker type and are on the battlefield at the same time, they're all put into their owner's graveyard. The Legends rule, which is Rule 704 subsection 5K, is basically the same thing, but applying to legendary permanents. However, with the new changes, there can be any number of Planeswalkers and Legends on the battlefield as long as their controllers only control one of that certain type. For example, in a 2-player game, Player A has already played Jace's Memory Adept, and it is now Player B's turn. If Player B plays Jace's Memory Adept, according to the current rules, they would both go into their owner's graveyard. With the new M14 changes, this would mean that both players would be able to keep their Jace on the field and have a crazy milling war. However, if Player B chooses not to play his Jace, and Player A decides to play a second Jace, both his Jaces would go into his graveyard, because one player cannot control more than one Planeswalker who share the same subtype. So just to simplify everything, the Uniqueness Rule no longer applies to the entire battlefield, but rather it only applies to the player's side of the battlefield. And now onto the Sideboard rule changes. As we all know, the main deck has a 60 card minimum, and if you were to have a sideboard, you were required to have exactly 15 cards, no more and no less. If your sideboard didn't have the right number of cards and it was discovered during a round, you were forced to have a game loss. I've always found this to be a really strange rule, and apparently so did the guys at Wizard. So they decided to change the rule to be a little more lenient. You're still required to have a minimum of 60 cards in your deck. However, your sideboard is now allowed to have up to 15 cards instead of exactly 15 cards. This is really great because if you were sideboarding some cards into your main deck and you accidentally left in 1 or 2 cards that you were supposed to take out, you would no longer suffer a game loss due to a miscount. The third rule change is indestructible now being considered a keyword. What does this mean exactly? Well, permanent abilities now include indestructible. For example, Gideon, Champion of Justice, has a 0 ability that until end of turn he becomes an indestructible human soldier with a power of toughness equal to the number of loyalty counters on him. If you play a spell or ability that can remove all abilities from target permanent, the turn side of Turn and Burn can once again make Gideon vulnerable to damage and spells that can destroy. On a similar note, unblockable is still not a keyword, or as they put it, demoted to definitely not a keyword. Why? Well, it's just a short way of saying something can't be blocked. The last thing affected by the rule changes is land play. As we all know, each turn, unless stated otherwise by house rules, you can only play 1 land. Of course, there are spells and abilities that allow you to play more than 1 land per turn. However, people consider these effects simply a way of playing an additional land and didn't directly affect the amount of land you can play per turn. With the new rule changes, it now means that you actually have to count the amount of land you play per turn and the effect that spells and abilities have on your land play count. For example, you've played 1 land this turn, and then you decide to play Urban Evolution. This ups your land play count to 2. However, if you've managed to somehow play 2 lands already this turn, you're not able to play an additional land. I'm not exactly sure how this differs from the current set of rules, except for the fact that it makes you more accountable for the amount of land you play per turn. So there you have it, the M14 core set rule preview summed up in about 5 minutes. Just a reminder, these rules are not in effect until July 13th for M14's pre-release. Until then, feel free to counter someone's Planeswalker by playing your own Planeswalker, or sneaking in land plays where you can.